Hey, this is Ron Coddington from Military Images Magazine, coming to you live on Tuesday night, December 28th. It's our end of the year special program. We are taking a look at the top 20 stories that appeared in Military Images in the year 2021. So it's a look back over the year that was and all the wonderful contributed stories that have appeared in the magazine. While we're waiting for folks to come on, say hello to everybody. Thank you. We'll give another minute or so for everyone to come on. I'll start by saying a thank you to everyone, all the new subscribers in particular, who signed up during Black Friday, Small Business Saturday, Cyber Monday. A number of folks who gave Christmas gifts and other holiday gifts. Thanks to all of you. Plus, of course, our folks who have renewed their subscriptions after receiving their recent issue, the winter issue. So a big thank you to all of you guys for your support. We could not do this magazine without you. I also want to give a big shout out to all of our advertisers, many who have been with us for years now. My thanks to you for trusting Military Images with your campaigns. Those of you who don't know the relationship that Military Images has with our advertisers, we stand by what they sell, who they are. They're the best and the brightest dealers in the business, in the field. So thank you so much to all of our advertisers. Again, thanks to all of our subscribers, and thanks for being here this evening. Happy New Year as we count down the days at this point. But I want to do a countdown tonight to go back through all of our stories. Now, if you add up everything that we've done over the last year across all 4 issues, if you include all of the stories and all of the departments that we do, the grand total is 83 separate pieces of content that we've produced. Each of those covers some aspect of Civil War photography, antebellum photography, and a few stories that go after the Civil War era. So we take a fairly broad look at the Civil War period and a wide range of stories to do that. So what I thought would be fun to do would be to look at, get some measure of what folks were looking at. So, and that's in addition to the anecdotes, the emails, the letters, the texts, and other messages that I get from you. And talking to our senior editors, our contributing editors, and other regular contributors who tell me what they like, and also what they see and tell me at the shows. So all of that anecdotal information is in my head, and I hear that through the year. But I wanted to find another source to get a sense of, could I get some actual data that would track the stories? And I found that data on journalstorage.com. JSTOR.org is a nonprofit organization. I've talked about them before. They came to Military Images a few years ago, identifying the magazine as an important journal to America's history, and they wanted to preserve it. So I sent them all the issues going back to 1979. They digitized them all. They made them all readable. They sent me back the originals, and then they put all those digitized versions online. And members, you can subscribe and buy single issues, single articles, or if you're a library or another institution, you can subscribe to it and get the articles that way. So I generated a report that gave me all the data for all the stories and what kind of downloads they had over the year. So what you're about to see is the top 20 of those 83 stories. They all had a lot of visibility, a lot of traffic, but these top 20 are the ones that got the most. So without further ado, I'm going to start going into this list. So let us start in the tradition of countdowns. We will begin with number 20. Number 20 is a gallery of stories by Jeff Richmond. Jeff, if you're out there right now, congratulations to you. Jeff is a motivated, inspired historian working at Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn, New York. Jeff has been great about finding images of soldiers and sailors who are buried in Greenwood Cemetery. He wrote brief profiles about a number of those soldiers and sailors, and we had the honor to feature them in this gallery. And so thanks to Jeff, and thanks to all of you who downloaded it and read it. So next, number 19. Number 19 goes to Ron Field, one of our senior editors. Ron, as you may know, is an expert, a multiple book published author on Civil War uniforms, on Navy uniforms. Ron is a go-to person to get information about any and all uniforms. One of those columns, his early uniforms of Dury Zouaves in 1861, hit close to the top of the list, coming in at number 19. Ron took a really interesting look at these uniforms, and the one note that stood out to me is I always had this impression that Dury Zouaves had a consistent look at the beginning of the Civil War. Well, guess what? That's not true. Supply issues, quality issues, all contributed to a little bit of a varying array of styles, all similar, but with subtle differences. And Ron describes this and so much more in his piece on these early uniforms. So kudos to Ron Field for his story on Dury Zouaves. Now, we're going to go to number 18. The countdown continues. This submission, kudos to Rick Lesseringer. His story about the Cambrian oratress, which is a name that the New York City press gave to the woman pictured here. This is Susanna Evans, who was originally from Great Britain. She came over here about the middle of the Civil War, preaching a message of temperance. She later got involved in soldier issues, particularly wounded soldiers. Charles Stratton, an amputee, was someone who she worked with and actually encouraged to get his photograph taken and sell it to make money. So Susanna Evans, I love the story. And Rick Lesseringer has a great ability to dig out these interesting stories that touch on our culture. He told Susanna's story and how it connects to Civil War photography. So big thanks to Rick for that submission. Now, we are going to number 17, and number 17 is, let's see here, so like I'm reaching into the envelope. Number 17 is this really interesting story by Dan Toomey. Many of you know him as a Maryland collector and an author. He wrote the story about a German immigrant, Ernest Barth. Ernest was a member of the King's Army, the Prussian army, and he helped defeat insurgents who were in rebellion against the crown in 1848. Those folks that rebelled called themselves the 48ers, and they came to America to escape the Prussian crown. Ernest Barth came from Germany in the 1850s, and here he is all of a sudden in the United States with the German people that he defeated in the 1848 rebellion. Really interesting story. So kudos to Dan for placing in the top 20. Now we go to number 16, and drum roll please. Number 16, Dave Batalo and Ben Greenbaum tagged up on this story of George Ellsworth, who is known perhaps to some of you as John Hunt Morgan's telegrapher. He was an expert in operating the telegraph machine. He attached himself, was in Tennessee to the Confederate Army, did all kinds of, I'm going to call them pranks, but they really weren't. It was some very clever use of the telegraph to be able to fool Union Army soldiers. So there you go. That's the story of George Ellsworth, and a big kudos again to Dave Batallo and Ben Green for Morgan's lightning strikes. Now, coming up on number 15, we have Kyle Steitz. Many of you know him. He is the heart and soul of the 10th New York Cavalry. He's a collector, has an amazing group of images and other artifacts from the regiment. Earlier this year, he did what I thought was a great story, where he looked at 3 albums, very similar albums that were created probably at the same time of the 10th New York Cavalry at Gettysburg. Now, this is before Gettysburg. I believe it was in late 1861, if I recall. They were first stationed there a year and a half before the battle. And so they had these albums made, and Kyle went in depth to talk about the images, the albums, how they might come to have been made. Really, really great job. What I also loved about it is the focus on the albums, because as collectors, we often think about the photographs, but for many of these soldiers and their families, the destination wasn't necessarily the single photograph. It was the album that they displayed the photographs in. So great story by Kyle, and congratulations on placing in the top group. Now, moving along to number 14, here we go. A surprise entry. We do a little feature tucked into the mail call section of each issue called Military Anthropologist. And what we do is we'll go back in time and grab data from various sources from the Civil War period. We also do some modern research into various databases, and this one happens to be research into newspapers.com, which, if you haven't heard me talk about it before, you know it's one of my most favorite sites. This particular data visualization, based on data from newspapers.com, tracks mentions of press coverage of Gettysburg and Vicksburg from May to November of 1863. What you see in these color bars is how Vicksburg is a huge story for the entire time and remains so. Gettysburg jumps in July of 1863 and then competes with Vicksburg until the very end of the year, when Vicksburg jumps up in popularity, probably because of Lincoln's speech at the dedication of the cemetery in Gettysburg, and Vicksburg begins to drop in popularity. So an interesting snapshot of data from media coverage in 1863. Coming in at number 13, a story that I wrote. Pardon me. I've long been interested in the question, why do albumin prints turn yellow? What causes that to happen? And in fact, when I became editor of the magazine in 2013, it was one of the original story ideas that I had. And over time, one thing led to another. I never got around to doing it. I had a couple of conversations with some folks who I tried to get interested in it, but it just didn't quite work out. So this year I thought 2021 is going to be the year when I write this story. So I wrote it, and it tells you the history of the problem with yellowing of albumin photographs, which begins very early after albumin paper is discovered in 1850, and of course continues to the present day. So that's the story of yellowing. Coming in at number 12, let's remove the cover, and we have our gallery of drummers. A big thanks to two folks with whom we could not have done this piece. The first one is Dale Neeson of the Image Collector, the Facebook page Image Collector. Dale put out a call to action to everyone who is part of his page looking for images of musicians, and that's cartes de visite, larger albumin prints, tintypes and ambrotypes of musicians, but they have to be posed with their instruments. That was the requirement. So if my recollection is correct, between Dale's page and other submissions, we had upwards of 200 entries, and from that we created 3 different galleries: one about drummers, one about buglers, and one about bandsmen. And drummers came in one of the top spots. The other person who played a key role in this is Chris Nelson. He is a collector of photography. You've seen him most recently in our story about Lincoln Abroad, images of Lincoln as seen through other countries, photographers who published images of Lincoln. Chris is also very knowledgeable about music and musical instruments. He carefully went through each photograph and told me more about the instruments we were looking at. So a big thank you to Chris, a big thank you to Dale for making this drummers gallery happen, as well as the other 2. Wow, how the time flies. We're up to 11, almost halfway through. And let's see what we have here coming in at the 11th spot. 11th spot is Elizabeth Topping's story about this really unique photograph that you can see here. It is an officer, a U.S. officer, who is wearing a sash, and he is next to 2 women who are dressed in patriotic garb. Liz did a fantastic job researching this photograph and coming up with the solution that it was most likely taken during the early commemoration of Gettysburg's National Cemetery. So a really great job, got a lot of attention, and Liz, many thanks for this contribution and for sharing just a wonderful and unique image with us. All right, we're officially at the halfway point. We're going to keep on going. Number 10 is Tracking Booth. Congratulations to Rick Wolf. Many of you know Rick because of his dedication and passion for West Virginia images. In this particular story, he talks about the Conger brothers, including Everton Conger, who was on the trail of John Wilkes Booth, chasing him into Virginia to the Garrett farm, to the barn, and Conger was one of the last men to actually see John Wilkes Booth alive. A fantastic story, great research, and much appreciated by all of our readership. So Rick, many thanks to you, and congratulations. Number 9, here we go. Let's see what we got here on number 9. It is from Chuck Joyce, one of the dedicated collectors who specializes in images of soldiers who participated in the Battle of Gettysburg. Chuck put together this amazing and poignant collection of images from his collection of soldiers who had suffered, been badly wounded, and suffered an amputation, or had their limbs literally blown off by shells and other fragments during the battle. So a really powerful collection of stories. What really struck me about them was these individuals, after suffering their wounds, they were not finished living. They still had the grit and the determination to continue on and to live life. And you can read these powerful stories in Chuck's collection. So Chuck, congratulations to you for having this really wonderful and powerful story. Now, Number 8 is, let's see here. Number 8 is The Compact, a story that I put together based on a collection of 12 portraits of soldiers who were all together at the hospital in York, Pennsylvania. They came from all walks of life. Some were wounded in battle, some fell sick and went to the hospital, but they all wound up together and they got to talking and wondering about the future. They ultimately made a compact to meet in 20 years from 1864 at Niagara Falls to talk about what their lives had become if they survived. So in 1884 in Niagara Falls, most of them were able to meet and tell their stories. So it was an honor for me to have the chance to do the research and to tell those stories, and it resonated with our readers as well. So off to number 7, getting close to the top here. Number 7 is the cover story from our issue from the spring of this year, and it's Capital Savior. It was written by Paul Russelloff. This is the story of the major of the 6th Massachusetts Infantry. This amazingly beautiful photograph of him posing with who we believe is a servant that he met while he was, or a young man that he met when he was in Baltimore after the riot of April 1861. Posed here with a camp set that has cups and dinner plates and all that in it. They're posed together here. This photograph was taken after the riot, and Paul did an absolutely masterful job of talking about how the 6th Massachusetts made its way through Baltimore. It is a story that we have heard. It's part of America's history. But I had a couple of folks tell me that this is one of the very best accounts they've ever read of that day in Baltimore in April 1861. So kudos to Paul for this amazing storytelling and sharing this photograph from his collection. Now, number 6. We're getting down to it here, my friends. Number 6, Ron Field's second appearance in the top 20. His story, another column about uniforms. And I neglected to mention earlier, so I'll mention it now. Ron's column, the first one on Dirty Zouaves and this one on uniforms of New Hampshire soldiers, were both part of our material culture column, which is a column that we started last year in honor of Mike McAfee. Mike McAfee, one of the finest, most knowledgeable collectors. After he passed away, we retired his column called Uniforms in History. But in tribute to him, I wanted to come up with a new column to continue the work that he started. And so Material Culture was born of that. And Ron Field, 2 of his submissions, both on uniforms of Union soldiers, the New York Dirty Zouaves and the Granite State folks of New Hampshire, made it into the top group. So congratulations again to Ron. Now we're coming in at number 5, coming down to the nitty gritty. Next up is another column. This is by Kurt Luther. Many of you know him as the founder and the principal of Civil War Photo Sleuth. I know many of you, and I have myself, used Photo Sleuth to upload images of identified soldiers and unidentified soldiers to tap into the database that uses face recognition technology to try to identify soldiers that have lost their names over time. Kurt has been writing a column by the same name, Photo Sleuth, for the magazine since 2015. This particular piece about the drummer boy, variously identified as Taylor and connected to a bunch of different U.S. colored infantry regiments was the subject of Kurt's exploration, and he went in depth to try to collect all the information that's out there. Some of it is the challenge, the veracity of it. Took a look at all the details. We're still not able to pinpoint exactly who he is, but I think Kurt was able to make enough connections and put enough dots on the map to help other photo sleuths to hopefully figure out his identity. So kudos to Kurt for his column on the USCT drummer boy named Taylor. Now we're up to number 4, another New Hampshire piece. We've got NHV, New Hampshire Volunteers During the Civil War, a fantastic gallery of New Hampshire volunteers. I have to give a number of collectors and contributors participated in this, but I have to give a special thanks to Dave Morin. Dave has been so generous in sharing his images. He's been generous in sharing his research. He's active on social media. He is definitely devoted to surfacing the images and the stories of New Hampshire's participants in the Civil War. So I was delighted to see this near the very top of the list because I think it speaks not only to Dave's interest in the Civil War and Civil War photography, but it also speaks to the interest that we have in learning more about states and the contributions that they made during the Civil War. An amazing collection of stories. 3 to go, the top 3. Here we go. Coming in at number 3 is the second story by Liz Topping, another story that I'd wanted to do for a long time. And Liz did a masterful job pulling this together. When Yellow is Black and Blue is White was our headline to capture the idea of how tones of black and white appeared in wet plate photography. You can see by the visual right here that yellow tends to go darker, blue can tend to be a little bit lighter, red is a sort of a weird medium value, and Liz details all of this. She uses primary source material from newspapers and magazines. There's a number of photographs to give you to illustrate some of the concepts that she's talking about. So it was a really, really great job. It opened my eyes. I learned a heck of a lot by reading this article. And so Liz, congratulations on a fine contribution. Your fine second contribution in the top 10. Now, we're going to move on. We got 2 left to go. Here's number 2, and it is They Knew Gettysburg Before the Battle. This is a contribution from the Adams County Historical Society. If you've been to Gettysburg, you may have stopped by. And if you haven't, you may have seen the news that they're building a brand new facility in Gettysburg. Well, as part of the work they're doing, they shared a number of images in their files, I believe mostly ambrotypes, if I'm not mistaken, for this particular piece, of civilians, citizens that were from Gettysburg. A number of folks in this article, in this gallery, were there during the battle, but there were others who were from Gettysburg, joined the Union or the Confederate Army, and were actually not present in Gettysburg during the battle, but they had roots in the town. So this is an interesting angle to look at Gettysburg through the folks who were not necessarily active fighting in uniform. Some served as nurses during and after the battle, and as I mentioned, some weren't even present. They were sons of families who went away to war and were not even close by the battlefield. So an interesting look at the Battle of Gettysburg. Now, we are up to number 1 on the list. Drum roll, please, as we reveal the #1 story that was most popular with folks who downloaded it on JSTOR.org. And this piece is by Austin Sundstrom. Austin wrote his college thesis on the idea of examining masculine ideals in Civil War photography. And according to his thesis, he looked at two different ways that soldiers displayed their masculinity. They did it in more of a restrained way, and they did it in more of a martial way. So by restrained, they might be sitting quietly with a book or with a sword at their side, maybe cradled in their arm. If they were posing in a martial way, they may have had their weapons drawn, holding onto their muskets, gripping their sword or their Bowie knife. That's the idea of a martial pose versus that more casual, restrained pose. So that really resonated with a lot of folks, and it earned the #1 spots in our countdown. So that's the end of the show. That's a brief recap of Military Images magazine for 2021 through the top 20 most popular stories. Keeping in mind, we had a total of 83 of the stories this year, and I am deeply indebted to all of you who contributed, all of you who read, and all of you support, all of you who looked at the images, and all of you who have commented on Facebook, on Instagram, on YouTube, sent letters to the editor. I am so very thankful for everything that you've done to help keep the magazine healthy and vibrant, and most important, relevant. Relevancy is incredibly important, and you all have helped to do that by showcasing, interpreting, and preserving these amazing images from the Civil War period. So a big, big thank you to all of you. If you have questions or comments, please leave them in the comment field below this video. If I don't hear from you in comments, I will look for you in the new year. I wish you and your families and all your friends a fantastic, happy new year. Take care. Bye.